Hello, everyone. We
are
Don't Mess with the Mommas. MOMMAS with our motto.
You are the protagonist of your life, not the victim of your destiny.
Take it away, Carla.
Okay,
Who are we?
I'm Carla Brown,
I'm Arlaana Black.
and we are Don't Mess with the Mommas.
Yeah, we said that.
Okay, and this is our second season, and we are going to be talking about ouch, my ego. All right, and I'm just gonna give you a little taste, okay? In essence, talking about the ego isn't about eliminating it, but understanding its influence so it serves rather than sabotages you. So we're going to be discussing that, what it feels like, what it may look like, how you can overcome, recognize it. So, Arlena.
Okay. So, ego, we all have it. And if we don't, then we're not alive. Now, Freud did his thing about the id, the ego, and the superego, but that's kind of old hat. We've got something, I think, a little bit cooler to explain the lesser and the greater ego. And the lesser ego gets you in big trouble, as you were just
Of course.
saying, and then the greater ego allows your life to flourish. Just to give you a little intro about that. So the lesser self, the small ego, is always compensating, right? So it feels isolated. Your identity is feeling isolated, fragile, and you're always looking for something external. And I know for me, when I was singing in clubs, I could have 50 people say, "Oh, you're great." If one person didn't like it, I would stick with that one. And I'm sure everybody can relate to that. It was just my nature, to do that. But the greater self looks at your life as universal, infinite, and you're totally free. You're boundlessly free. A couple more things and then back to you.
Okay.
So your primary motivation, you're always looking to self-preserve that ego. You're always protecting that ego. And you need instant gratification. You're always looking for that gratification. And you're living in fear. You're living in lots of fear rather than having compassion and creating value for others. And you're okay. It's not like you have to compare yourself to everyone. You're happy when somebody else wins. It's not like, oh, that person wins, so I must be losing. Right? And you feel, like you're trapped. You're a victim of your history. You think that you can't grow from that. We're going to be talking about trauma in next episode. But the greater ego, the greater self, recognizes that hardships are your raw material to really develop your mission. And finally, it's not like me versus you. It's more you realize your interconnectedness. So back to you. What do you want to talk about?
I remember a friend of mine, I was having some issues at work, and she was telling me, take your ego out of it. And I was like, what do you mean take my ego out of it? And then, but that caused me to have to step back a little bit and reevaluate the situation and stop fighting and wanting to, hurt people because, and my sister told me, being right doesn't necessarily, win the day for you. It's you could be right, but hey, what are you doing that's going to make things worse because you won't let go?
And it's what creates value, right? It's not like right or wrong. It's what can create the most value, so that person feels like they're in a winning situation as well as you, not like win versus loss. For me, when I was like hungering to get married and I was like really determined, but I was like in the world of what we call the world of hunger. And it was like my ego, every time I would go out, and I was living Upper West Side Manhattan, and I would go out in the street and seeing couples, and I was like immediately like, I was so depressed.
Why me? Why I don't have nobody?
Why me? Yeah, and I got so depressed. And my encouragement was to open up the scope or the lens of your life, which I really like because, you're into photography. I used to love photography
Right.
well. And that made sense to like my life was just so narrow. So it was like I was almost grabbing like cookie crumbs, like I was looking for not for the cookie crumbs, because I was in a world of desperation and,
Yeah.
comparing myself to everybody. So when I really determined I would open up the lens of my life, then I was able to embrace so much more in my,
And get a husband.
and get a husband too. Yeah.
Now, the ego can also sabotage, and the ego interprets constructive criticism as a personal attack, and that is very hard when you get into you feeling that you're attacked. You can't see beyond the moment, and it can really cause problems for you in other ways. Instead of learning from feedback, the person becomes argumentative and makes excuses and blames others.
That
And
blame game is the
right,
biggie. That's why, right?
right. And then what happens is you get stagnated. You miss an opportunity to create value, improve your skills, or you know, and I know that I think when I remember my ego really being very big, and I couldn't listen to anybody. And I had a moment when my brother-in-law was telling me something, all right, and I could actually hear him through my anger and through my I could still listen. And I took what he said and I thought about it, and it helped. He just said, "Well, what are you doing? What are you doing now? Is it whatever you've done? Has it helped you any?" And I had to reflect. No, nothing that I was doing helped me any. If any, it made it worse.
So I got to ask you, was it your big ego or small ego?
It was my big ego.
Well, I think it was a small ego that you were defending, like protecting. So
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
it was not enough,
Yeah,
not enough
just-
self-worth or
Yeah, well, that goes along with trauma. But
yeah, for
anyway,
drama, yeah, for sure. And then when I used to write for our newspaper, the World Tribune, and I used to do all the, experiences. And I remember working so hard on somebody's experience and, spending hours and hours. And then I showed it to our editor, and he said, "Do it over. It's all your ego." He didn't see anything about that other person. And it's true. It was like I was trying to shine, rather than that person shining. And, it was very, very humbling. Being a journalist could be very humbling because you want to, step out. You're writing, right? I want to show, who I am and stuff. And I had to do the whole thing over again. But that was the best training, to have to really, get her her experience in her words, not her experience in my words, and maybe I could share a little bit too.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so experiencing failure or rejection, and that's the hardest. That's the hardest, like what we were just saying,
Yeah.
So the small ego, or the lesser self, takes failure as a definitive verdict on its identity. It either spirals into intense self-pity, "Oh, I'm such a failure," or projects blame outward onto others, what you were saying, and the environment to protect its fragile, pride. So that's why people complaining, and complaint doesn't change anything. The more you complain, the less you're going to see the positive effect. The greater ego views failure as a vital data point, a lesson, or the precise resistance needed to build deeper resilience. It remains anchored in its ultimate worth, knowing that a temporary setback cannot diminish its inherent nature. And so, failure, like a lot of times, especially young people are raised not to experience failure because it's like, oh, my child is going to be crushed by this. But then they never develop resilience or strength, They're always looking to be the perfect, right?
Yeah.
Which totally is off, completely off.
Yeah, yeah. Let's see what else that we can say about it. Oh, so it's a constant dissatisfaction
Right.
with yourself or somebody else. A feeling of it's never enough. It's like, oh, I can't get you once, I got to get you twice. That kind, and it's really self-defense. It's like protecting whoever you think you are.
So the fact that we're all when people realize that we're all interconnected and that we're never isolated or we're never really alone, and it doesn't mean, aliens, although be nice to meet a few.
I want to meet one.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I want to have a nice dialogue. I want to get to know him. Like we perceive these aliens as like evil, right? But they're not.
I
They're
want to do the mind meld.
yeah, the okay, they're good guys, good gals, or whatever they're going to look like. So but we're all, the universe is one, and we're going to be talking about that too. When you realize that, you don't have to protect that self that feels like, oh, I'm all alone and I've got to really, protect myself so much. You're connected. You're always connected. And I think when you realize that, then you're not always trying to like defend what are you defending? What are you defending, right?
The other person is just a reflection of yourself.
Right. And that other person is struggling just as much as you. I mean, don't think that you're unique. There are no struggles in this world that somebody else has not experienced, So yeah, open yourself up, be happy and care about not just you, but the other person as well, because, that's how we all, grow.
And maybe you have to recognize when your ego is starting to flame up. There's some physical components to that, So the lesser ego defends immediately, needs to be right, compares constantly, controls others, says, I know, it's fragile, it breaks under criticism. Now, the better ego listens first, wants to understand, measures self against own past, manages self, asks, what am I missing? Resilience learns from criticism. So it's like you open yourself up, you slow down, recognize what it is that you're going through, and then you can pull yourself back and take a better view of what's going on.
And, when you care for somebody else and you really think about that other person, it feels really good when you see that person have a victory. It doesn't mean that that person's victory is going to harm you in any way. There's plenty to go around. And if there's not, there needs to be plenty to go around. Let's see. So yeah, I think, well, I'm just going to share this too. Sorry, we're reading a little bit this time, but so pretty much what you said. So the small ego, or the lesser self, views life as a zero-sum game with a limited amount of happiness available. When a peer succeeds, it experiences a pang of jealousy, secretly wishing they would fail so that you could feel superior again. And that's like what we talked about when we talked about the 10 worlds.
Yeah.
That's like the world of animality. That person has to fail so I could feel good. And then the greater ego, the greater self, celebrates the other person's victory with genuine joy, operating from a mindset of absolute abundance. It recognizes that another person's breakthrough is proof of what is possible, inspiring its own continued growth. So stop ouching. Right?
Yeah.
Stop ouching.
Yeah. Watch your ego. Watch it, feel it, whatever, when it comes up, recognize it, and then step back and review, and then come back again. I had a really hard time with my boss. I mean, I hated her and she hated me, okay? And at some point, I just said, no, I'm not going to fight this with, I'm not going to fight her. I'm going to let her do her job. Her job is to do this. This is not my job. This is her job. So I'm going to let her do it, and just, and I think that made her very happy, because I asked her, I relied on her to do something. I wasn't in competition with her.
And she needed that. She needed your encouragement, because sometimes people in a position of responsibility don't really know how to handle it. So they could become authoritarian because they lack confidence, and we certainly see that in society today. Or they lord it over you because their own lack of confidence, right?
Yeah.
So what you did is really allowing her to
shine,
to shine, right? And you were able to shine as a result.
And she came back to me, and about something else, another person that we were working with, and she asked me, like, could you talk to him, so on and so forth. And that made me feel good because I was able to see something about her, that she had a heart, that shell that she put on was really because people probably messed with her,
Right.
didn't
Sure.
appreciate her, you know, didn't see the value in her, you know, and she had to be that way to protect herself so she could do what she had to do. So, you know, and I wish I could have gone to her retirement party, but I just couldn't. I didn't have the time. So if you're out there, Juanita,
Juanita, huh?
Yeah.
Juanita. And I have a friend who, when I first met her, all she would do is complain, complain. And then I found out the reason she was complaining so much is at one point she had lots of money, financial fortune, and she lost it. She spent it all, and she was really struggling, you know. But so she did a turnaround. Actually, she started chanting "Nam Myoho Renge Kyo," and in her job, you know, people like couldn't stand her at first, right? And then, you know, she turned everything around, and then she got most improved employee. And now people really love to work around her. And she told me that in the past, her whole history in the past, nobody wanted to be around her. And now she loves the people who she works with. She, you know, the people love her to be around. And we call that eshofuni, as you change, your environment changes.
right.
You know, so she took her small ego out of it, and you know, now is embracing people and encouraging people, and they're encouraging her back, and she's having so much fun, you know, so much fun, and not stressing so much about the finances. That was a biggie. You
Yeah.
know, the finances made her life very, like, you know, uptight
Yeah.
and stuff. And we're not mentioning names, of course. But anyway, so what else do you want to share?
Okay, so
Anything
let's
else?
see. I think we could do
That's a
maybe,
wrap.
yeah, just get some final encouragement.
Encouraging. There's nothing final about
Nothing.
encouragement. We always want to encourage every moment of every minute of every day.
Yeah.
Find a way to encourage.
So, with that being said, only when we learn to channel the energy we direct toward winning over others into winning over ourselves can we begin to develop our humanity. It is not how you compare to others that is important, but rather how you compare to who you were yesterday. If you've advanced even one step, then you've achieved something great.
Oh, I love it. That is wonderful.
Okay.
Yay. And next time, by the way, we're talking about trauma. It's
Trauma.
called Trauma Talk. It's a little bit heavy duty, but everybody experiences trauma. Everybody has an ego, and everybody experiences trauma in some way, and it gets in the way of our life. You know, we have to use it as a springboard for development, not to crush us, right? So, and we would love to hear from you, Mommas, MOMMAS podcast@gmail.com. And we're getting lots of good feedback from
Yes.
YouTube. You could find us TikTok, lots of
Spotify.
Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, all of the platforms.
That's amazing.
And even Substack, which I think
Yes,
I'm
Substack.
posting. I never know if I'm posting it right.
And Blue Sky.
And blue skies, nothing
but
but blue skies.
Do I see?
We don't rehearse the musical
yeah.
arrangements. But anyway, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
We are Don't Mess with the Mommas, with our motto.
You are the protagonist of your life, not the victim of your destiny.
destiny.
Yes.
See you soon.
Yes, okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.